Awesome. Thank you very much, Avery. So look, wherever you are in the world tuning in, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. My name is Mark Buchan and I welcome you to the business focus track of this Transcending the Crisis event. I don't know about you if you've been tuned into the last previous session, but my mind's a bit buzzing after all the stuff and the conversations that are going on, and I maybe see I was a bit active in the chat there, but I'm not going to dwell on that so much more. So look, what's this business track about? Well, just very briefly, business has the power to do such good in the world. Yeah, and as such, the organizations who engage in whatever their business is. But yeah, our experience and research over the years would suggest that a lot of business and many of the organizations carrying out that business are somewhat killing our planet. And as many of you will no doubt agree, it's time for a change. And it's time for a new set of paradigms around business leadership and organizations. So today's speakers that I'm going to be chatting to are offering us their perspectives, guidance and insight into how they can bring about this change. And I'm going to be starting by talking to Bill Joyner, who will share with us some perspectives about utilizing his model of leadership agility. I'll then go on to talk to Professor Tony Bendell, who will discuss distinctions around anti-fragile organizations and how they can contribute to new paradigm. After that, I'll be speaking to David Cushman, who will give us some insights into how a responsible organization can help in times of crisis. And last but by no means least, I'll be talking with Jeremy Denisti, who will be discussing perspectives that he can offer on the adaptive resilient organization. So just let you know as well that we will keep a few minutes at the end of these sessions for some questions. However, if we do go over, because I mean, my chats with Bill sometimes tend to go on because I find them deeply interesting. So we may or may not have time for it, but if you do put your questions out there, we'll get round to answering maybe shortly after the event. So very briefly, just a short intro about me. I'm Mark Buchan, Managing Director of the Agile Leader, author of Leaders, It's Not How You Finish, It's How You Start. I'm a leadership and culture specialist. I was going to say expert there, specialist is better. Executive coach consultant with over 20 years experience, helping organizations become more agile and troubleshooting agile transformations. I now train and develop aspiring agile leaders in leadership. You can find out more information about me and the other speakers today under the contributor section of the Transcending the Crisis website. So that's enough about me. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Bill Joyner. Bill is one of my favorite authors, and his book on leadership agility is one that I read way back in 2011, and I was inspired by it from the get-go. I recommend this book to all coaches and leaders who want to help themselves and their clients advance and evolve their agile mindset. Bill has literally decades in the field of leadership, team and organizational agility. Bill, or maybe I should say Dr. Joyner, has a doctorate from the prestigious Harvard Business University in leadership and organizational development. Bill runs his own consultancy, ChangeWise, with his better half, Deborah, and I hope you don't mind saying the better half there, Bill, where they help leaders transform their capacity for effective action in a business environment buffeted by accelerating change and mounting complexity. So there we go, there's all my script done. Welcome, Bill. Good to see you today.
Thanks, Mark. Good to see you.
Awesome, awesome. So look, I don't know how many of the listeners here already have an idea about leadership agility, the model, etc. I'm just wondering, might that be a good place for us to start, to chat a little bit about the model, why we have leadership agility, and maybe how it can maybe help us?
Yeah, I think I would like to share a few slides. I mean, I myself am a visual thinker, and I think it's helpful to have some images to hold the ideas we're going to be talking about. Then we can just go free form after that. I just want to add about ChangeWise. We work both with leaders in their organizations and have for decades, as Mark said. But we also have another side of our business where we work with coaches, and we do a lot of training of coaches. We've probably trained 400 coaches around the world. So we have a wide network like that. So whether you're a leader or a coach, this might be of interest to you. Let me just, I'm going to have to take a minute to share my screen so that I can show you these slides. There we go.
Awesome.
All right. So
technology works.
So basically, this leadership agility model, which is based on extensive research, it really looks at how personal development and leadership development work together. So many of the previous speakers have mentioned, in one way or another, the big importance of the inner side, the personal side of leadership to dealing with this crisis. So I want to start by saying that there is a body of research, and I've written an article on this, pulling together the research. It basically shows that the level of leadership agility in companies, what I call leadership culture, the more advanced that is, the more agile that culture is, the more agile the organization as a whole is. Not to say that's the only ingredient you need for organizational ability, but it's a crucial one. And then it also shows that the more agile organizations have better business performance, measured in all the traditional ways that are measured. But what is leadership agility? Well, I'll say a few things about this in the next slides, but the core practice, leadership agility is not a switch you turn on, it's a practice that you do and you evolve. So the core practice is reflective action. It's sort of like using a Zoom camera. You're focused in on something, and then you're able to mentally step back from what you're focusing on and get a larger perspective, a deeper perspective of what's going on, and you use the insight that you gain from that perspective to adjust your action to meet the situation that you're in. And it's a cyclical process. So we find that the more agile the leader, the more frequently they do this, the more quickly they do this, and the broader and deeper perspective is that they can step back into.
Can I interrupt you for a second, Bill?
Sure.
We're finding it a bit difficult to hear you at the moment, so I'm just wondering if you might be able to speak up, or I noticed when you turn your head that maybe we don't catch full on.
Okay, well, let me try something here.
That would be awesome, thank you. I didn't want to break the flow there.
I just plugged in a device that I think might help. Is that helping on the voice?
That is much better. Can you start again now, please?
What is that?
Can you start again?
Oh, yes, great. No, you're kidding, right?
I am kidding, but maybe if there were some points that need clarifying, that's I could just make you out. Okay. So but we'll see.
Okay. So this is just a way of graphing the environment that we're in. So a lot of people talk about today we're in a VUCA environment, right? Volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And of course, with the pandemic, it's sort of like it's kicked in, even that is kicked into high gear. But I believe that the fundamental underlying causes of this environment that we're all talking about are two powerful global trends. One is that the pace of change is getting faster and faster, and the second is that everything is becoming more interdependent and complex. And over time, we've gone through stages in this. Once upon a time, these factors were low. Then, let's say the last half of the last century, moderate, but today it's very high, unprecedented, to use an overused word. So I'm going to come back to this chart in just a second, but basically what we found in our research and our work with leaders and organizations is that the more agile the leader in the organization, the more effective they are in dealing with this environment. And now I'm going to lay something over the graphics that I just showed you. These are what I call the levels of leadership agility. So what our research found is that there's a tight correlation between stages of personal development, meaning developing emotional intelligence, developing more complex ways of thinking, and levels of leadership agility. I call it expert, achiever, and catalyst. And what this is showing on this graph is that the expert level can be quite effective if the pace of change and interdependence is quite low, which of course is rarely the case these days. The achiever level can be effective in an environment where these factors are moderate. In other words, this was the leadership that worked well in the last half of the last century. But now we are facing, this unprecedented environment, and it's the catalyst leaders that are the most effective and the most resilient in this environment. So in a way, this is like just a way of saying that the kind of leadership that brought us here is not going to get us where we need to go from here. But it's also a way of being very specific about how is the leadership different that we need in today's environment. So that's all I wanted to share in terms of slides to kind of set up our conversation. So I'm going to see if I can. Oh, I think I did it. Okay.
Good. Awesome. We're back. That's excellent.
Yeah.
So look, Bill, I mean, this is interesting because, as I've said before, I've looked at your work now for some years, and I was fortunate enough to be trained by you to do some of the work. And it's an interesting point, isn't it? Because in the conversations that have gone on previous, there's this talk about expertise. And I made a little note earlier that there's already some themes from this event starting to pop. And I think what your work here is sort of alluding to is the need for these catalyst leaders. Because an expression I've come up with now after listening to Sunil and people like that in the previous chat is about transcending expertise. Because I think people are so bought into their expertise. So
right.
What are the sort of things that the model can help with that?
Yeah, let me put a little meat on the bones here and say just a little bit about each of these levels so we have an idea of what we're talking about. It's not just labels. So leaders who are operating at the expert level are tactical problem solvers. And they tend to solve problems without much attention to the larger context around the problem or its connection to other problems. And the key here is that they are identified with their expertise, whether that be technical or functional. It's like, that's me. And if you challenge my expertise, you're challenging me.
Yes.
Because I'm so identified with it. So I haven't transcended my expertise, to use your term. And there's minimal stakeholder engagement. So that's kind of a picture snapshot of the expert level. The achiever is different in that it sort of builds on and grows out of the expert, but it's a strategic orientation, and it's very focused on outcomes. So that gives me, whereas the expert wants to do everything the right way, the achiever can look and say, okay, we need to get to this place down the road. How we get there isn't so, I'm not so attached to how we get there as I am to that we get there. Achiever leaders realize that leadership is not just about authority and expertise, it's about motivating people. And they're very dialed into the need to build stakeholder support. So that's the achiever leader. That's the leadership that worked pretty well in the last half of the last century. Catalyst leaders do something that one of the catalyst leaders I work with called aiming through the target. So what did he mean by that? He meant the target is the strategic outcome. He needed to raise his company's share price as a CEO. He needed to raise his share price pronto. But he said, in archery and karate, they teach you to aim through the target. And what I'm aiming at through the target is to transform this organization into one that can deal with any challenge that might come along. So, as we see with the pandemic, no strategic plan would have prepared you for this. But what the catalyst leaders are saying and doing is they're creating cultures that are characterized by high levels of participation, empowerment, collaboration, straight talk, because they believe that's the kind of environment you need in your organization to be able to sense and respond to things that are coming. You can't put it in some specialized upper level department like strategic planning. So the catalyst leaders are also, they create these highly participative teams that sort of model the culture that they're trying to create in the organization, so they can do that, they can bring that in a genuine and authentic way into the organization. And in terms of what I call pivotal conversations, meaning you've got differences you have to resolve, they are very good at moving back and forth between being clear and articulate about their own views and this deep listening that we were hearing about in the opening conversation today. So that's kind of an overview of the three levels, and maybe you can kind of sense from that that there's a lot of connection between catalyst leadership and some of the kinds of things that have been discussed previously in this conference.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So one thing that's going on in my head right now as you say this, Bill, is that you've said that, I mean, and I don't know how accurate the figures are for these days, but because I know that the research you did was
still pretty accurate.
They're still pretty accurate, right?
Yeah.
So if we're only got 10% of leaders out there that are catalysts, are we rather in a bit of a corner then? Because if this is what we need right now, and if this is all we've got, then are we not now just going to stay in the same rut that we've always been in? Because I know that heroic leadership will come to the fore. Don't worry, I'll come and I'll save you. Get out of the way. And that's the expert, isn't it? Who wants
expert and achiever, the heroic levels of agility. Yeah.
Indeed. So
if we don't do anything, then you're right. If we begin to recognize the catalyst leadership that's taking place in our organization, and it's usually in just sort of little pockets here and there because it is so few people, and sort of reinforce and amplify that. But also, of course, and then we can think about that when we're selecting people, use that as an additional lens. I have a CEO client who's doing that. That's sort of part of his logic in hiring people, is looking at their agility level. But, the big thing is developing leaders by investing in leadership development. And the thing is that traditional leadership development, there's a term that's being used for the sort of the stages or levels that I'm talking about, which is vertical development. And that's contrasted with horizontal development, which means you're developing new skills and competencies, but you're not changing your level of agility. And that makes it hard to learn, even if somebody's teaching you skills and behaviors that are more catalyst-like, if that training or education or whatever process you want to call it, if that's not also addressing the underlying cognitive and emotional capacities that you need to develop, then they're not going to stick. And we see that happen a lot, right?
Yeah.
So, it's a matter of, we use our Leadership Agility 360, and we have a whole coaching methodology for facilitating this kind of vertical development. What we need is to sort of build on the best of leadership development that we have now, the action learning approach and all of that, but pay more attention to this vertical development dimension. I think that's what we need to transcend expertise and deal with the crisis that we're in.
I'm struggling a bit here, though, Bill. I have to say, because is there not a trap there? Because if I hypothesize for a minute, and actually, if I lean on my own experience in organizations, that a lot of these leaders that live at the expert level are the ones who are at the pinnacle of the organization. So when I come into an organization, I say to them, do you know what you need, guys? You need more catalyst leaders. Then it's always like, well, what's one of those then? And I seem to invariably get all the time, people telling me, but I'm very agile. Oh, that's excellent. How about we measure that then? No, geez, at the time I must go. So it's, there's a bit of a trap there that people don't want to be told that they're less agile than they really are. I think it's the Dunning-Kruger bias, isn't it, that actually comes to fore. Is there a way we can sort of approach that sort of trap, so as to not maybe have leaders feel so defensive about the fact that they are experts as opposed to catalysts, and we need.
Yeah, great question. So a couple of things. One is that statistically, a great majority of leaders in the executive ranks are achievers. So it's not as much of a leap from expert to catalyst. And there are many leaders who are kind of maxed out on the achiever level. You know, they really do that. I mean, sorry, the achiever level. They really do that well, and some even sense that there must be more to leadership than this, particularly in these times, but they're not sure what it is. So one thing is, you know, just to see what the spectrum is and what it looks like, and to be able to think about, well, where am I? Where do I spend most of my time on this spectrum? And, you know, we always present this in a very non-judgmental way. It's not like you should be a catalyst, because that just makes people defensive, as you say. It's like, here's a set of possibilities. And the whole thing about catalyst, developing the catalyst, don't think of it as like a ladder that you climb and you get to the top and you spend all of your time at the top of the ladder. It's more like you're developing, you're expanding your repertoire so that you can operate at the catalyst level whenever needed. You can also operate at the achiever level or even the expert level, depending on the situation. That's another dimension of agility, is to be able to calibrate like that. So it's not setting up some ideal that everybody should be judged against. It's more laying out a possibility and a roadmap, and having a very rich description of what that catalyst leadership looks like, both behaviorally, but also in terms of the cognitive and emotional capacities that you're going to be developing as you expand your repertoire into that dimension.
That sounds somewhat like situational leadership in that regard, isn't it?
Well, it's not the classic situational leadership model by any means. I think it's much more sophisticated than that, but it is situational. I mean, it says that there's not one right way. There is a set of possibilities. The only thing is, if you haven't developed your catalyst capacities and behaviors, you don't have the option to go there. Yes. So that's why it's so important to be able to explore this. And then in something like this 360 process, people they find out where they are. But the emphasis is not on, are you an achiever, are you a catalyst? It's more, the emphasis is more on, what's the feedback? What do you want to work on? What are you moved to work and motivated to work on? And almost always that generates an action plan that is moving from one level of agility to another. But it's now, they're coming at it from the inside out. They're not coming at it as some external model that they have to live up to.
Actually, that's such a good point, Bill. And I've just had a quick look at the questions that were in the Q&A coming up there. And there was a question there about cross-silo leadership, and how catalyst leaders would work with that. And I think that's actually, maybe if you could give some good examples around how that will work, because it's this issue that we have isn't just a simple one, is it? It's a highly complex one, maybe chaotic even.
Yeah, so just briefly, I mean, expert leadership generates silos. I mean, or reinforces the organizational silos that are there, because you're working on you're comfortable working with an area where you have expertise and authority. Now, achievers are a lot better than experts in working cross-functionally. They can take in different points of view. They realize that stakeholders are really important. If they're doing a change in their organization, they look across silos and say, well, who's going to be impacted by this? We need to somehow engage those people. So that's obviously a lot more enlightened than the expert approach. I think some of the biggest differences for the catalyst are that let's put it, there's a dimension of this model that I call stakeholder understanding. How deeply do you understand a stakeholder who has different views than you do? So an achiever can pretty quickly gauge whether a group or whatever stakeholder group or person is on board to what they want to do, or resistant, or could care less, or whatever. The catalyst really digs much deeper, and they try to understand what are the pressures, what's the experience really like for this other person. So it's one way of putting it is that it's not just putting myself in the other person's shoes, which a achiever can do. It's sensing what it would be like to be the other person in their shoes. That's a different thing, right? I can say, oh, Mark, you went through this experience. Oh, I know exactly what that's like. I can put myself in your shoes, but I don't really get what it's like for you from the inside out. And when you have that level of understanding of where stakeholders coming from, particularly if they have differences, it puts you in a position where you can actively explore those differences in a non-contentious way, which is much harder if you don't have that same capacity. Also, it's just catalysts are more collaborative. I mean, achievers are more collaborative than experts, but the depth of collaboration that a catalyst leader can generate is much deeper and more makes bigger difference.
So we've only got a few minutes left, Bill. This has gone
Sure.
so frighteningly quick that
Yeah.
it was so almost annoying. We should have had an hour. Yeah, but
Yeah.
anyway. Final question then, because we won't probably have a chance to take many more questions that might be popping up. Let's just make an assumption here that Monday morning comes round, and the people sitting at the pinnacle of the organization, the ones who have the power to make the most difference, what's one thing that these people can do on Monday morning that can make such a huge impact and difference to their organization so as to, if you like, transcend this crisis?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to choose to focus in on what I call self-leadership agility, because that's what's most under your own control. Self-leadership agility is about getting feedback, being aware of your impact on others, experimenting with new behavior and getting more feedback, and so using reflective action to look at yourself and how you can improve as a leader. So, one thing is to come out of this conference and say, okay, what are one or two things that I want to do differently as a leader, or what do I want to do more of, or what's my edge? What's my growing edge as a leader? And get very clear about that. What is the behavior I want to do instead of perhaps what I'm doing now? And also, is there a mindset that I need to shift to really support that new behavior? And what is that? That's a little harder to get to, but and then to do, if you're familiar with the world of Agile, in Scrum, they have these sprints where they do, 2 or 3 weeks of work, and then they stop and pause and get feedback. So if you think of this as self-leadership as a series of sprints, so like Monday morning, you take 10 minutes to look at what you decided you want to work on. You look ahead to what are the opportunities I may have this week to do that, specific, meetings and relationships. And then practice, because it is a practice, and then at the end of the week, take 10 minutes to reflect. How did that go? How do I want to adjust that? So you're doing your own kind of little mini sprint of self-leadership. And, and the more you can get other people involved who might be able to give you feedback on how you're doing, of course, that's all to the good.
Awesome. That sounds great advice, Bill. Bill, look, I'm really sorry about this. We're all out of time here. And
no worries.
But again, there's some questions coming up, so maybe we'll get to answer some of those offline, and maybe we get a chance to chat again in the future, because this has been awesome. Bill,
that would be great, Mark.
For your time.
Thanks for guiding me through this.
No, you're very, very welcome, sir. Thank you.